You'll put it in, wait for the beep, utilize this thing called the lancet. So I'm going to have a word about these lancets. First of all, you want to make sure they stay clean, okay? And how do you know? Every time you use them, wipe the top. This one pulls off the top, and here's the needle that you insert. You push it in, twist off the top, put it back on, avoid covering it. You will squeeze your finger. Now, on where do you stick? You want to stick on the side, not on the top. And if you're sticking somebody because they're afraid of needles, please avoid the top and try to use your non-dominant hand. If you're right-handed, use your left. And if you're lefty, use your right, because it's hard to write with a Band-Aid or something on your finger. Again, squeeze your finger, and you want to put the instrument, the lancet, right onto the finger on the side and press the button. You want to make sure you get a nice pool of blood at the top. Take this strip, there's a sucking area, and you put it right there until the machine beeps, and you will see the number register after a few seconds. What do you do after that? You're going to take the top off. Notice the needles right there. Do not throw away the cap. A lot of people don't know this. You're going to use the cap to cover that needle. And then you want to discard this into a glass or into a biohazard area. You don't want to leave these needles running around. The other thing I've heard people are doing that I don't want you doing, do not reuse the needle. Don't keep it in there and use it again, right? I know they're kind of expensive, but it's not a good idea because blood dries on these needles, and it can also make your readings, make an error in your readings. So do me that favor, please don't reuse your needles. Same thing with these strips. Once they're used, they're done. Discard them also in an area for blood. So we can monitor using any one of these. Now, these readings are only one-use readings. I am so happy to know we now have something called continuous glucose readings. Amazing. In fact, people who are not even diabetic can use these. What do I mean by that? A continuous monitor is one that you put on, and this is one of them, which is called the Dexcom. Another one is called Freestyle. And pretty much what you're doing is inserting a strip into left or right shoulder, and it stays on your body for 2 weeks. So you don't have to keep sticking your finger day after day, 3 and 4 times a day, which is amazing. And for those who can't stand being stuck, like myself, I would not want to be stuck 3 and 4 times a day. It's a great idea to have. You can bathe with it, you can swim with it, you can work out with it. And if you find that it's falling off, you can just put a tape over it and it still stays on. So I'm going to highly recommend, this one is called a Dexcom. If you have uncontrolled blood sugar and you're already on insulin, your insurance should pay for this. And if they don't, you can go to the manufacturer's website and you can request some assistance to helping pay for this. Okay, so please, please, please. The final thing I want to also share with everybody, because everybody is so excited about Ozempic, Mounjaro, for the wrong reasons. They're doing it for weight loss. But the beauty of this new type of insulin, it's a once a week shot, which really helps to control your blood sugar, simply because a lot of people don't want to have to use the regular insulin 3 and 4 times a day. And you got to also look and see what the number is, and it can be challenging. The Ozempic comes in a pen. This is what they call it, a pen. The medication is in the barrel. You will turn to the dose that you want, put a tiny needle on it, and inject it just like a pen into your abdomen. And that's it. Once a week treatment. So for those of you who are running high blood sugars and you're not taking insulin because you just don't want to have to inject yourself every single day, 3 and 4 times a day, speak with your doctor about a long-acting insulin, such as Mounjaro or Ozempic, to see if you could move away from a daily injection to a weekly injection. It may have a higher copay. You may cost a little bit more, but it might be worthy for you if you're actually going to get your blood sugars controlled. And of course, the added benefit, if you're overweight, you could also see some weight loss, anywhere from 7 to 10 pounds a month. And if you're really aggressive, 20 pounds. Yes.
Mm.
So that's my story for really understanding why it's important to monitor your blood sugar. But I've asked my friend, Sam Grant, how long have we known each other?
Oh, too long.
Don't say
Before,
that. It's not too long.
before the gray.
Before the grave. Yes.
Oh man, it's been good. Yeah, but this is a new world for me. I'm adapting to it as quickly as I possibly can to get this here, but I do want to go on record as saying that this was not an easy thing to do. I don't want anyone to come across and saying that, oh, he picked it up all of a sudden. Because no, if you're anything at all like me, you probably run into some challenges where you've never done something before, and then it doesn't involve you personally, and now you have to be responsible for the care of someone else. That can be kind of challenging.
And Sam, for the audience who, let me clarify a little bit. Sam is a caretaker for his wife. He is not diabetic, and but his wife is. And he, as a caretaker, when he says this was not easy for him, he had to learn. And so he's going to share his story and on the journey that he took to really understanding diabetes.
Well, I got it's actually a two-part story. Back in about 2016, I ran into a situation where I found my wife laying in the bed, and she appeared to be so dehydrated to the point where it looked like her skin was just stripped over a layer of bone.
Wow.
Everything was just completely sucked to her. I didn't know what was going on. She was irresponsive. And so we called the ambulance. And when the ambulance came, they actually took her to the hospital. We were in Hollywood, Florida at the time. And I found out in the ambulance that my wife was diabetic.
Wow.
So apparently she had been
Scary.
diagnosed before, but she was keeping it somewhat to herself to do this. And I think she was treating her own, but she was doing pretty well up until that point. But that night when she got to the hospital in ambulance, she was at, wow, I think it was 1400, 1500.
The blood sugar?
Yeah, blood sugars are
Oh my
1400. So
goodness.
they were like putting everything in her to get it down, to get it under control, to get it there. So, but after about 3-4 days, they were able to actually sort of get it back under control. It took about 3 or 4 days to get it back under in the normal range. And she came out of that, and she had a slight sag on her mouth at one point, but she exercised and got that back, and
Oh
that
my
was okay.
goodness. Wow.
And we were pretty good with it until then. Still to see a little bit was something slightly different about her. I wasn't really sure, but she still managed everything, and everything worked out all right, and we were fine.
So, so in the beginning, if I understand, so she had to be hospitalized, and they gave her probably IV insulin to bring it down, as well as fluid, because you found her dehydrated. And what a lot of people don't realize is that when your blood sugar gets so high, you'll have symptoms of dehydration. You'll be thirsty. You'll be wanting to drink tons and tons of water, but you're also going to be urinating a lot because your body is trying to get rid of that excess sugar that's just floating around, causing complete havoc. And she was in a state of complete dehydration from the sugar just sucking all that fluid out of her.
Exactly. It was pretty scary for a while, but I was glad when we got her in there. And when we got home, that's when we started with the insulin, and that's when we started to work with the AccuChecks and the rest of the systems. And I was given the task of injecting her, which was kind of tricky for me because at that particular point in time, I had a little needle phobia. So that took a little bit to work through. I got through that challenge because I became the person who did all of the sticking for her.
So let me get it. You had the needle phobia, but she was getting the needle.
She was getting the needle. So it's my responsibility to give her the shot on a regular basis. So that was like 3 times a day. I had to actually continue to give her insulin, check and monitor the readings on it. Granted, this is a level of responsibility I didn't have before, but we made it. We kept it under control. I continued to do it for her because she didn't want to do it herself. I said, okay, I'll take care of that. Now, around Christmas of 2022, we had a situation where she ran into a scenario where she did not recognize me. She was looking at me and she was calling for me as if I were in the back to come out to sit with her while the stranger was talking to her. So I thought something was
And you
really
were the
wrong.
stranger.
I was the stranger in the living room. I didn't know what was going on. And that's when we said something's really wrong. So after about an hour, we all got in the car and we took her to the hospital so that they could actually do diagnosis on her. And she had had a couple of strokes, which was challenging. So along with that, and that was started her stay at Jackson over in the Lynn Center. I think that's where she was mostly there, and that was a real challenge because they had to do everything for her. Ability to walk, everything was affected, and it was a real challenge.
How was her blood sugars at that time?
Up and down, still kind of floating back and forth with that because we were trying to control it because we didn't actually know what the real cause was because I didn't understand food. I didn't understand sugar, calories, salt. I didn't understand any of that at all. I had no knowledge of how to take care of that. So we were eating regularly.
Right.
And I thought maybe eating less was going to do it, but it wasn't that. It was actually what was in the foods that we were eating.
Isn't that crazy? That's sometimes we think we're eating good.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, a lot of people don't know that fruits have a tremendous amount of sugars, but they're good for you.
Yeah.
And don't realize that it can actually elevate your blood sugar.
Yeah, there were certain fruits that we found out through experience we had to avoid completely.
Like which ones?
Well, we found out too that you can't have watermelons too sweet. You can't stay from that. There were certain things, but even no, we weren't in the slither. We had to stop that. But there were a lot of, but for the most part, there were a lot of fruits that we were seeing as bad. But the list got really long, so we just eliminated all of the stuff from it and started working what was good. So we found out that blueberries turned out to be really good.
Okay, blueberry, high fiber.
Raspberries were okay, and blackberries turned out to be pretty good.
So yeah, my favorites are berries because they have great fiber and they don't what we call spike the blood sugar.
This is true.
Yeah.
And if once in a while I'll take one strawberry and then dice that up and put that in with the mix and then give her a bowl of fruit with that, and that's a nice appetizer for her to eat. So she sometimes has that before breakfast, which is really good. So that works out really well. So anyway, when she was getting ready to get discharged, I don't know if anybody's ever been through this before, but what the doctors do is that they put you in this room where they sit you at a table. It's a rectangle table, and there's a specialist in every chair, and they begin to go down the list of things that they are specialists in that is actually now affecting your wife's scenario. And I can honestly tell you that that was the most difficult conversation I ever had because every single one of these persons across the table was giving me something that I could barely even understand. And then the news was there wasn't anybody who had anything really good to say, which was also really discouraging.
Yes. And I'm sorry you had that experience because health professionals, that's overwhelming. They mean well, but sometimes your health professionals, especially in the specialty areas, want to give their area.
Yeah.
And the link between all there, especially with diabetes, that affects every single organ. It can affect the nerves, it can affect the heart, it can affect circulation.
Which then circulation affected her because the circulation to her brain was also another challenge that we had to deal with. So that was the cause of that. Then we started dealing with dementia setting in to get that too. So that actually was another byproduct of what was happening. I did ask the doctors, I said, okay, after I kind of collected myself, I said, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? And that's when I started to get the encouragement of what we could do. And I learned some things. They said that you can treat this and you can live with this. This can be challenging. So, and then came the day when we went home. Now I'm at home now, and I know absolutely nothing about what to do. I know nothing of this. So I'm learning everything that I can from all the brochures and the pamphlets that I brought, home with me. And I was prepared for certain things, but I wasn't prepared for the changes in mood, the outburst. I would sometimes go off on my own and just have to sit and just kind of like center myself.
The fluctuation in your blood sugar can affect your mood?
Yeah, it did. It did really affect it a lot. It was causing, we'd have some times where there would be instances where she'd be talking to me in a manner of like, leave me alone, she'd get very belligerent. She'd chase me out the room. She refused to do anything. And then other times she'll come back and apologize and say, I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that. So it was interesting to see touch and go, how it was working. So I said, I'm going to try to get as much help as I can, which I had for a little while from some family members. But like everything else, you can't expect that to go too long because everybody has their own life and
Yeah.
everybody has to take care of their own family. So when they finally had to say, okay, I can't come and help you anymore, I accepted that and said, okay, it's good. You've got to go back to doing your thing. And I began to research more about care. There were some challenges with the insurance company where they were not willing to pay for anyone to come in
Right.
to help me. So I had to
Depend on the
become that
insurance.
person. Yes, yeah. And so that was a challenge.
So
So
you became the all
I
inclusive.
became the all-inclusive caregiver.
And I want to mention here to our listeners that it's so important that you do your research. One of the things and reasons I brought my friend Sammy in to talk to us is that sometimes we'll be afraid and not do the investigation. Yeah, I have my diabetes. Okay, 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 and not really do the research you need on how to take care of it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you'll read so much that it becomes so overwhelming. Do I eat this? I don't eat that. I'm not supposed to do this, and it can cause a shutdown effect. And I know you
Yeah.
had that
I had
experience
that
too.
experience too as well.
It was just too much, an overload,
Overload.
right?
Yeah.
So how did you get to that place where you
Okay.
were able to manage
All
your
right.
blood sugars?
Well, before I retired, I was a college professor, which sort of helped my organizational mind of putting this over. When you're learning to prepare lesson plans and things
Yes.
like that, you have to use for a long period of time. You understand, okay, I need to treat this as if it were a lesson plan.
Okay. All right.
So I needed to find out where all the culprits were. So I began to document absolutely everything. The time we got up in the morning, all the way down to from the time she went to bed at night, I would document the food that was going in, what we were eating in detail, what the levels were. Every time I took a test or a reading or for blood pressure, for body temperature, for the insulin sugar levels, I wrote it down.
Right.
And I developed a, okay, don't laugh.
You don't have to go that far, but it's important to document.
I developed an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay. He excelled
that
it out.
documented all of the information so I could actually sort of track what was going on. And then I would have something that I could physically share with someone else so they could see what was actually going on. I would even bring that to you so you could see it.
Me the logs
And I started to look, and what it helped me understand was where the bad foods were. And I was able to discover where the culprits were because I could see where the sugars were going up and down with that.
And what you can take, you don't have to develop a spreadsheet,
No.
but you do have to do what Sam did, which is to pay attention.
Yeah.
Pay attention to every time your blood sugar spikes and log for yourself. Just write somewhere, oh my gosh, I just had, a tuna sandwich with 2 slices of bread and it went up. Paying attention matters. And if you really, really want to know, a good log will help you. If you don't really want to go into a spreadsheet, but just paying attention and writing down what will affect your blood sugars.
Yeah.
And by the way, your brother and your sister and your mother and cousin will be different. One person will do well on blueberries and raspberries.
Yeah.
Another person, it will skyrocket their blood sugar. So don't assume just because your cousin, your aunt, or your best friend can have one thing and they're diabetic, you're going to have the same experience. Have you noticed that?
Yes, I have. There are a lot of diabetics in our family. So it's sort of especially on Trish's side of the family too, is a lot of them have different levels, with some type 1s and some type 2s. And I would often ask them for advice on what was going on. I had to be very careful how I dealt with that information, because there were some people who said, no, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad. And the other person said, no, this is okay, that's okay, that's okay, for the exact same item.
So the same thing.
And they're monitoring it. But I don't want to like put them on the spot to do it, but talking to my relatives who had diabetes was actually the most beneficial. I did not know how to cook. So I started learning how to cook, 2 years ago, and that's it. So that was a big challenge.
2 years ago.
I'm still nowhere near anything good with that. I'm still experimenting, but it's been very helpful. My kids are helping with certain things. I'm learning how to season, but at the same time, I'm also learning how to prepare foods. And I started to read a lot. I read as much as I could. And a lot of people don't like to read, but I wanted to find out what was going on. To me, it was like doing research for a class, for a lesson plan.
Gotcha.
So I used that to try to find out as much as I could about how I should be handling this. And that was great. So all of these things here were really great, but they were starting to then slant me into something else that was really weird, which I think is something is very important that you mentioned too, which is I found myself doing everything for her, and at the same time, I would find myself dizzy for no apparent reason.
Okay.
I'd find myself tired. I'd even have to sometimes I'd have to just sit down for a while. And one time I even lost my balance. I started
Wow.
looking that it would be I hadn't eaten meals. I
Mm,
hadn't eaten, for like 6, 7 hours. So I
wow.
didn't really know what was going on. And I started looking and said, wow, I've got to really get this under control. And there was a real term that I found online for it as well too. It's called caregiver burnout.
Mm,
And caregiver burnout is real. It
okay.
is real can be. And I was classic
Let's say
symptoms.
lightheaded, dizzy, not eating for hours on end,
Hmm.
taking care of your
Yeah. I got
service.
dizzy behind the wheel of the car one time, but thankfully I was in a lane I could pull over. And I
Wow.
just sat there for a minute to collect myself. And you don't realize it when you're so busy taking care of someone else, you can often lose yourself in this. So I would
Wow.
highly recommend that whoever you are taking care of, if it's a family member, make sure you don't lose yourself in the caring process, because it's very easy to put everything on them and then lose yourself in the process. So once I got that under control, I said, I'm going to eat no matter what.
Okay.
I'm going to make sure that I stay on my regimen. So I had to create a regimen for myself to
Nice.
take care of that. So
I'm
that's
glad you did.
I'm glad I did that as well too. So that means as long as I'm strong enough to take care of myself, I can strong enough to take care of her.
Tell me how one of the things that Sam shared with me that he did I thought was quite unique, and I thought you should share with everybody else. You had
Okay.
all these pills, you had all
Ah,
these
man.
bottles, you had all this stuff that you had to
Man.
morning, evening, noon, night. That can be
Okay.
really overwhelming. Tell
It
me your
was.
technique that you came up with that was so useful.
Okay. Well, without taking a stab at those people who manufacture pill boxes, I know that those
Please
things
do.
are valuable, but I do want to let you know that there's an inherent flaw in that, because one of the things it's a challenge right now to keep track of that. That's one more thing that sort of adds an extra layer to the responsibility of taking the pills on time to do this. But I said, you know what? There's got to be a way to do this. So I came up with a simple solution of doing this. I went to the store and I got these little color circular decals. They're about maybe like about half inch, quarter inch in diameter.
Those little dots,
They're
right?
little
The colored
dots, the
dots.
color dots that you just peel them off. They come in different colors. And I would use those, and I'd take the pill bottles and I would put those color stickers on the top of the pill bottles that had to be taken at particular points in the day. Something had to be taken with breakfast, after breakfast, something had to be taken around lunchtime, before night, this, and each one would have a certain color. That way I would always know these are the pills
I'm
that
doing
she's
my
supposed to
reds
have.
right now. I'm
These are
doing the
reds now, these
yellows.
are yellows now, these are blues now, and these are these here as well. So that's how I was able to track that. So that saved me the hassle of taking them out of the
Put
bottle,
them in the little.
loading it up in a compartmental, pill container for Monday, Tuesday. No, that turned out to be a real mess, and I
So
couldn't
I think that's
deal with
brilliant.
that.
And so I really want to go into details because so many people are using pill trays. And if it's working for you, continue. But you're right. Taking them out of the bottles, putting them into the little hole,
Hmm.
and just even the process of the time that it takes to
Yeah,
do that and divvy it out for the entire
these
week
are weak.
can be time consuming. But putting the colored dots on, these are my reds are morning, greens are evening or afternoon, and so
Exactly.
on, could be an alternative way of remembering how to take your medications without having to every time pick up the bottle. Okay, one at 6 p.m.,
Yeah.
which can cut down on your time. So put that as a note for you if you have to take a bunch of meds and you just want to shorten that time process down a little bit. All
There you
right.
go. All right.
So when you finally figured out the eating, right?
Yeah.
I knew there was a point in time where you thought you got it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we this is it. What are some of the things that actually threw off the stable blood sugars? Can you think of some of the things that had happened? So now you finally, and this will happen. You will get your regimen. I take my medicine at this time, my blood sugar, and then something happens
Mhm.
that can make your blood sugar go off.
Okay. I found out two things. The most important of the two things I found out was that it was what you were taking in, and the amounts of food you were taking in was a very interesting mix of doing that, because there were certain things that had to be mixed in the right manner in order to actually work. So you had to have like it's like mixing a starch and a meat and a vegetable, and then you had to understand which vegetables were the ones that were beneficial for that. Then you begin to work into quantities, because I found out that you can't just give people less food. Less food means that now they're still hungry. And so
Yes.
if I tried to cut back on food, because some people would say, okay, give her a little bit less of this. And then I would say, okay, had enough. She says, no, I want something else. Now
Mm-hmm.
she's still hungry.
Still
So now
hungry. Yeah.
I have to feed her something else. But now I've made an inappropriate amount of food. So now what's left is
Starch.
starches,
Starches.
and
Starches are
snacks. And
easy,
so I
right?
should easily get this or some other form of a snack that has this one. So now you're looking at like a dessert or something like this, which you
Mm-hmm.
can't do. So all of these things are off limits. So I started to just kind of like monitor what she was eating. I began to start reading the ingredients on the
Mm.
size of things. I tried to stay away from anything that was processed.
Okay, here we go
The
again,
less
guys.
processed food you eat, the better off it is. If you're diabetic, if it comes from a building that you can drive a building through and it's got a yellow and red in the logo, don't go there.
Okay, so we know process. I've
Mhm.
told the audience many times, if man made it, don't eat it. If it's in a box, it's cracked. Don't eat that either.
It's a
Okay,
real challenge.
it's a challenge
Hmm.
because there's so much sugars added to our foods.
Hmm.
Out the ground, off the tree, running around.
Yeah,
That's and
there's
the
a
right quantity.
the right quantity of doing that as well too, because I found out that if I gave her the right foods and I would give her like larger quantities of food to eat, and she would clean her plate,
Yes.
even though I think, oh, she's not gonna ever finish this, there'll be leftovers, and I'd come back and there's like 3 or 4 grains of rice left on the plate, and that's it. So she was healthy, had a healthy appetite. Then the interesting I noticed too is that the sugar didn't spike, and the
Mm.
reason that the sugar wasn't spiking is because I mixed the types of foods that she was supposed to eat in the right combination.
Okay, tell us what that was. We
Well,
want the secret. We
okay,
want to
well,
know
this,
what's the combination
okay,
for
this, well,
diabetes.
there's no, there's no big secret to doing this, but what you want to do is that it's a matter of just making sure that you monitor the amount. It's in the salts and the sugars and things. You have to monitor. Read the size of the containers. Read the boxes if you're going to get something in a box. If you can avoid a box, get something natural. The ways that you cook it. Stay away from as much. Try not to use salt. Try to avoid that if you can. Salt is really just more for taste. It's not it's not necessary. Isn't
Yeah,
but there's so many alternatives for that. But you have to have you have to have a certain amount of meat. You have to have a starch, and you have to have a vegetable. Now you look to see which vegetables are the best that are strong to do that. So I found out, okay, if I'm going to feed her like a steak or a meat or something like this, I will give her less of that and then give her more vegetables next to that.
vegetables.
And so that actually sort of balances out a little bit more. And sometimes the rice is usually like kind of harmful. I give her like a
Handful.
spoonful,
That's it.
like a spoonful, like a handful.
That's all you
Like
get.
you only get a little bit of this. So I put that in there. So that's how I keep that under control. So you watch for the things that are still tasty, but not necessarily good. And then you work with other components. Salads are very, very good. I work with a lot of, we use a 50-50 mix a lot, the spring mix.
Yes, and
And
they're
that's
already
it.
prepared. So
And they're
that's
pre-prepared, and I make those. I get the tomatoes that are like the little grape tomatoes. I put those in there as well too. Be mindful of the different types of dressing. Read the size of dressing, salad dressing on that. Don't
oh
just give them anything.
man,
Some of that stuff is pretty bad. You got to watch for it. So read everything carefully,
yeah.
and then find out too. Also, read what the daily intake is for a person. Like a lot of people don't even
Oh,
know how much.
what do
Okay,
you
how
mean
much
by daily intake?
well, let's
Like,
say
I
right
mean,
now, how much you got to think, for example, hey, how much sugar am I supposed to have in one day for it to be considered safe? And that's different for different people. It may be one number based on the medical results. Like,
3,000.
uh,
No,
no,
no, no, no,
no,
no, no.
no, no. You have to be
Max out at
careful where you get the
100
information from. Don't just go for the default numbers. I mean,
for
look and
search.
monitor it. Search and do this, and then once you find out what those numbers are, you do what you have to do to stay below those numbers. So
Yeah.
one thing I found out what the salt intake was, what the sugar intake was, what the carbs intake was. I found out all of those numbers, and then I made sure that I prepared foods for her and myself, which is another story too. I make sure that she stays well within that range.
Yes, got
And
it.
for me to keep from being pre-diabetic, which I don't want to get into at all like that, I cook for her and I cook for me. So we're eating essentially
Similar.
the same types of foods on that. So that makes it better for us. So we're both healthy because of that. I wish I knew the technical terms for all the
That's
stuff that I'm getting on that
oh,
too.
that's okay. That's
But
okay. I think you broke it down really well. And what we wanted the audience to get to is that if you're
yeah,
caring for someone, and I don't think we can emphasize enough, take care of yourself.
yeah, hmm,
The other thing, simplify things for yourself.
yeah,
Pay attention to what does spike your blood sugar. If you're the diabetic patient, pay attention. If you know that if you eat, 3 Oreo cookies, it spikes, then Oreo cookies is not going to be part of your life for much longer.
Yeah.
Now, everything that Sam spoke to us about is for someone who's really, really committed to maintaining and controlling blood sugar and eliminating diabetes if possible. Um, and just listen to what you shared with us. It does take work. It does take you to really be committed. And I believe it's worth the time and effort to put the energy into knowing how your body responds, what works for you, finding out the how do you describe it? The balance.
Yes,
The
finding the
balance.
balance.
For me, the easy rule is 50% vegetables should be
Yeah,
every plate.
that's
For
exactly right.
40% in your protein. That's anything with crawls, walks, swims, or flies, or beans if you're a vegetarian. You know, you can do
Mhm.
5 beans if you
Yeah.
want to.
Mhm.
But, and then that 10% of your plate will be your starch, which is your hand. And we can't talk enough about that a starch is juice, soda, you know,
Mhm.
candies, cookies, desserts, those are all on the sugar side.
Yeah.
So that's still in your 10% little square box.
Yeah.
So if you're going to choose to have a glass of wine, um, that's your 10% for the day. Okay, that's it. We're done here. Okay, so if you want to have some rice, you know, Thanksgiving is coming up.
Yeah.
Keep
Mhm.
in mind that it can't be more than 10%, or you will end up with your sugars elevated.
Yeah.
So I thank you, Sam, for coming out today. It was really great to hear from a caregiver the
Mhm.
impact that having your sugar go way too high, how it can lead to stroke, it
Yes.
can lead to heart attack, it can lead to vascular disease. How important it is to know what works for you, and most importantly, take care of yourself.
Yes. Most
Yes.
importantly, don't lose
So
yourself
thank
in
you
the
for
process.
joining us on Helping You. I'm Dr. Michelle Powell, your counsel, Sweet Woman for C3. Next week, we're going to be talking about stress and the holidays. The family is coming. OMG, what to do to manage our stress through the holidays. And I hope you join me again. And I hope this was helpful. Please like and share with family members, anybody you know who can benefit from understanding diabetes, pre-diabetes, and how to care for someone with diabetes. Thank you.